Welcome to the FEI Icons podcast. Nobody becomes an icon by staying comfortable. These are the moments that stretch them and shape them. Real stories, real strategies, real leadership. The titles are public. The turning points were private. Until now.
I'm Heather Cole, finance leader, executive coach, and proud member of FEI. My goal is simple. Take the stories behind the titles and turn them into lessons you can use. If you've ever looked successful on paper but felt the weight of, am I doing this right? You're in the right place. Stories, strategy, leadership. Let's get into it. You know that feeling that the train's already moving and then someone hits turbo? Today on the FEI Icons podcast, I'm joined by Teri Reinseth, Senior Vice President, Corporate Controller, and Chief Accounting Officer at 3M. She's calling in today from very snowy and chilly Minnesota. And Teri brings the kind of calm operational leadership finance needs when everything is moving at hyperspeed. In this conversation, Teri breaks down how she and her team keep pace in the global business without sacrificing accuracy, compliance, or sanity. We get into why her mantra is reduce complexity, standardize, and simplify. Because speed without clarity is just chaos. How finance earns the real seat at the table by connecting the dots across tax, treasury, procurement systems, and business before the surprises hit. What she tells leaders, especially women who feel like they have the title but not the voice. Build relationships, ask better questions, and insert yourself upstream. And the line you'll remember, be fast, be accurate, and be gone. Because finance can't live in yesterday if the business needs tomorrow. Plus, Teri shares a story from her early career at 3M that perfectly captures her leadership style. When others said, that can't be done, she leaned in and said, sure, I'll do it, and then pulled it off. Let's jump in with Teri. Welcome to the Financial Executive Icon Podcast. Today with me is Teri Reinseth, the Senior VP, Corporate Controller, and Chief Accounting Officer of 3M in very snowy and cold Minnesota. Teri, welcome to our podcast. How are you doing today? Maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit.
Great. Thanks, Heather. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be back and talking with you and the FEI Icons. So maybe, yes, I am in cold Minnesota. It is very cold here in January. And, all kinds of headlines happening in Minnesota right now as well. So there's all kinds of unique challenges to being here and running a business. I've been at 3M for 20 years, and I've been doing this role for about 7. I started my career in public accounting at Arthur Andersen as an auditor, and then left there when Andersen went bankrupt, and ultimately ended up at a client for 3 years and was their controller, which is where I really learned how much I loved to be with the business and that I'd made the right choice to, leave public accounting and being an external auditor and join a business where you had a voice and you saw the results of your decision making. And I've been at 3M for 20 years. I've been in all kinds of finance roles here at 3M. Back to my roots in this technical chief accounting role. Previous to that, I spent about 13 years in the business as one of our business unit CFOs. And those were some really fun years and getting engaged with our business and our products and our customers. But ultimately, here I am back in the technical space and responsible for, 3M's accounting and all of our external reporting.
Well, when I think of 3M, I really think of like the technical innovations. I mean, your organization has always been the leading edge on technology. But in the world today, it appears the pace of things is changing a little bit. I don't know about you, but when I was coming up in finance and technology, things felt like they were going fast, but now it's on hyperspeed, like the fastest moving train ever. Like, would you agree? How has that impacted your position?
Oh, Heather, that's such a true statement. And in fact, we've got a relatively new CEO and a relatively new CFO. So they've both been in their roles for, just over or under 2 years. And so, yes, the pace of change just with our business, our markets, the geopolitical situation. We operate in over 70 countries around the world, and each of them has its sort of unique set of complexities and risks. And you add on top of that all the things that are becoming even more, quickly changing at a pace that I've never experienced before in my career. It is a bit hard to keep up. And then you add into it like new leadership, which I think has been, fantastic here for 3M. They really brought back a focus on this innovation, like you said, that, 3M has become known for the over 100 years we've been in business. And so that's super exciting to, bring back new products and what does it mean to be an innovator and trying to bring in, digital transformation and AI into our products and our processes. And so I can just speak for myself and my team, like the pace at which we're trying to keep up with change is incredible. It could be as simple as just like understanding, like, how do we connect the dots amongst the finance organization between tax, treasury, the business, my organization, who ultimately sort of closes the books and makes sure the results are accurate and compliant. Like, that's a lot of work to keep up with everybody, got their own tactics and objectives to deliver. And then we've got our business and other functions doing the same thing. And so it's exciting, because we are finding ourselves being introduced to new technologies and new platforms here at 3M. We're an SAP shop like a lot of our peer companies are, but to move at a faster pace and with more agility, it's not all SAP. So we're trying to find sort of what are these additional bolt-ons and digital platforms that we should be on to, better manage our customer contracts, our suppliers, better consolidate our books, like all these things that we've got to move at a quicker pace and with better, leaner technology maybe than what we had been. So there's just a lot of change, and, think about like what are those things and how do you show up every day and still have like the right amount of energy and action behind these things. But I expect a lot of our listeners here will be able to understand and be able to apply, what I'm saying about the pace of change to what their work looks like too.
I got to tell you, many days being in finance and technology myself, many days I wish I could go back to the 80s. I don't know about you, but I'm like, I don't need the cell phone. Let me go back when time was, time was slower. But how do you, in your role, I can only imagine that it is coming so fast and so many things. And I like to say that AI is fabulous because it gets you to wherever you're going faster. But if you're going in 20 different directions, that means you get split into 20 different directions faster. It's almost like bringing you chaos quicker. How do you maintain a mindset every day to be like, I got this? Where do you even start with that?
Yeah, so I think at least the way my organization is thinking about it, and we're aligned obviously to the strategies of, our leadership and, whether it's our CEO or our CFO, our focus is how do we reduce complexities? So we look at the work and, that we can control ourselves. So how do we reduce complexity? How do we standardize? And how do we just make things simpler? So that's maybe sort of the table stakes. So we're asking everyone in the organization, like, we need to get on board with this. Like, if we thought we were sort of dabbling in like a global standard process for, something as simple as our AR allowance, and we do it different in different systems. Okay. why and how do we change that? And how do we take sort of a lot of the manual effort out of that? So it's all sort of like, that's sort of our mantra, is reduce complexities. And then the middle layer, I'll say, is about like, how do we do our jobs more efficiently? So that looks like, we are sort of trying to get to the table. We're going to deploy a new consolidation and reconciliation tool that supports the work we need to do. And the work we need to do is, you need to be able to do your work faster with the same accuracy or more. And you got to do it compliantly. Because if I don't do any of those things, like, nobody really cares what you do, right? So like, what kind of technology can we get there? And a technology that isn't going to take us years to deploy and millions of dollars to do it. You've got to be able to do it in a very efficient way. And so I think that's something, that we've learned too, is like, in order to get sort of finances needs at the table with IT and with other, priorities in the company that maybe deliver revenue or we don't, you've got to find a way to articulate that value proposition that you can bring sort of in what I'm calling our middle layer. And then the last bit is like, how to continue to take out either non-value added activities we're doing, or to sort of move them up in their process so that we, if I think about just how we close our books as an example, like, that needs to be faster so that we're not spending time in history and analysis, and the business can move on to, what is the next thing they're going to develop and how to drive sales. So the ask for us is like, be fast, be accurate, and be gone, right? So I get it. And so there's like an excitement to that. Like, everybody kind of gets jazzed about, what are we going to do to support those initiatives? And we have projects that we run, on a 12-month-ish cycle. Some of them take longer than that. Some of them we've been working on for a couple years to get better at. But that's sort of how we think about it. And then obviously there's just everything else, right? There's, whether the company's doing portfolio prioritization or rationalization, other transactions, all these things on the side, it's sort of like, you just have to sort of take those on in the prioritization too. But I'd say those are the three things that we try to focus on to keep in front of us. Like, how do we keep pace and be relevant, right? And to be relevant, we have to be at the table, and we have to be working at the same pace the rest of finance and the rest of, the business is moving.
So many good nuggets.
Yeah.
So I'm going to back up a little bit and grab a couple out that I took notes on. So one of the things you started out with saying that, the simplification, the reducing complexity, what I may be interpreting, and you can validate this, is you guys, and you're saying we have a seat at the table. To me, it sounds like what you're really creating is what I call alignment, so that you're coming into these initiatives, everyone on the same page. Don't know if you realize how unique that is. So many corporations think they have that, but it sounds like you guys are actually making it happen. Would you agree?
I don't think we do it well all the time, for sure. And I think I spend a lot of time doing that, like trying to connect the dots and trying to chase down things that I think are impactful or are upstream. A lot of us who are preparers, like, we're at the end of the road, like we're at the bottom, like everything just flows to us. So whether it's right or wrong, it's like there. And so I'm always trying to figure out some of those things beforehand. So I spend an enormous amount of time doing that all the time. Like, I commit a lot of time during my week trying to get aligned and trying to bring my team along with me. And maybe part of it's because I've been here a long time and I know a lot of the people in some of these other orgs and some of our other functions, but we wouldn't be able to do what we do if sourcing and procurement, like if they're not on their ball and on their game and, their train's not running. But by the way, they're deploying a new system. So, okay, we got to know about your system and our demand planning. Like, okay, that's important to us. Okay, how does that impact what we're doing? So we definitely do not always get it right. But I probably spend like a third of my time these days just trying to do that. And I think it is because things are moving quickly. There's a lot of new, people in the organizations and leadership who maybe don't understand or haven't built some of those relationships. Like when I first talked with FEI through the icon, it was during COVID. And we were talking about like, how did we respond to COVID, which by the way, was like a whole set of changes that got thrown on us. And I think how 3M, not unlike a lot of organizations, a lot of big organizations, I came to understand, like they just like embraced it, right? And used it as an opportunity to become more productive and more efficient and think about better ways of doing things. So that's just continuing, but at like a much quicker clip. But a lot of people that I work with here in other parts of 3M weren't around for those things. They haven't cultivated all those relationships yet. So, and I don't know, anybody who maybe knows me or heard me talk before, I think relationships are a super important part of like sort of any business role. I feel super strongly about that in the finance roles, like creating those, relationships just builds the connections and the ability to get aligned. So I don't know, maybe that's how I think about it. I would never tell you, Heather, or anybody else that we got it and that we're all aligned.
I love that you're saying a third of your time is spent on alignment because, and you mentioned about COVID, I look at COVID was like this catalyst for automation and doing things differently because we didn't have a choice, right?
Right.
It set a framework to say, by the way, we can actually move faster, but it's almost like it's getting faster and faster. But the alignment to me and what I'm hearing you say kind of validates this is it's almost like the grease that greases the tracks so you can go faster without crashing, right?
Yeah.
Getting everybody on board.
I guess maybe like some of the fail safe there is like, you're building process and controls as you go. And of course, that is like the best way of doing it. And ultimately where we have to get to, the reality is like sometimes that doesn't come together very cleanly. And there's sort of refinement that has to happen. And that happens here too, for sure. Or we find out something too late and you've got to figure out an alternative approach to how to solve the problem. But, in finance, we have a unique position. And our unique position is that you can see very broadly across the company that, we support. You can see globally, you can see deep into the businesses, you have access to data and decision making. And so I think some of us maybe underestimate the importance of our roles and the voice that we have to be able to do more alignment. So, whether people like it or not, like I just tend to stick my nose into these things to, try to create some alignment or at least an understanding. Like, okay, what is it that's changing? How fast do we have to do it? And then like, what are the implications? And that doesn't always come very easily.
One of my organizations I have is a coaching business for CFOs, CEOs. And one of the things that I often get clients coming to me, they say, Heather, I have the title. I'm the CFO. But I feel like they don't listen to me. I feel like my voice is not being heard.
Yeah.
I have a feeling you have some words of wisdom for women, especially that feel like they're like, hey, I'm here to help. I can help. And people aren't inviting them in. What words of wisdom can you give those people?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's always a struggle to be in the right place at the right time or to be there when the conversation is happening. And sometimes leaders make that easy. Like they're inclusive and they're collaborative and they bring you to the table. Like I've had a boss before who said, I don't like to make a decision without my FP&A person or my controller. Okay, those are the two people that as long as you can get the three of us comfortable, like we're golden. I've had other bosses who don't make it that easy, who sort of just keep marching and assume that we all connect sort of below that and we're all aligned. So maybe just some real like tactical tips and tricks that I do is I reach out a lot to like colleagues of mine, like that are in other functions. And I say, tell me the projects you're working on. Like, what are they? I also follow them on their, we have like the internal Microsoft Teams. And so we've got this Viva Engage. I follow all them. And so I follow them. I follow our business leaders because sometimes that's the way you find out things is sort of grassroots. And then I do a lot of follow up. I say, oh, like, well, what is that going to do? And so I ask a lot of questions. And I don't know. I've always just thought like, I don't know, they can tell me it's a stupid question or they can, send me off to somebody else. And that's always how I start. Like, who on your team can answer this question? Or who on your team can give us a broad enough picture of what your priorities are so I know where we fit in? And I do that a lot. And I do tell people, like, you have a voice and a perspective that a lot of people don't. So you ought to try to find a way to use it. Sometimes it's like as you're coming up through the org, it's like, hey, let me present the financials, the update, whatever, at your team meeting, your town hall, so that I get some visibility. So people know, like, if you have questions, you can come to me. You don't have to go 3 layers down. I would often ask questions beyond like what I was looking for. Like when I had like finance manager kind of roles and we were working on forecasts, I would find reasons to reach out to business people to ask something beyond what it was like, I needed so that I would know more about products and customers and things like that. And it's a bit of a natural curiosity. So, maybe you got to really have an interest to learn and to figure all these things out, but it helps our jobs, I think. I think we become more effective when we can do that. And I think you kind of become invaluable. Like, I'll get people all the time sort of like, who do you think I should talk to? Or can you help me with this? Then I'm not always the right person. And I don't always have time to answer all those things, but I try to find somebody that they can connect with. So maybe those are just a few of the things I've done to try to get that seat.
What I'm hearing you're saying that you're doing is you're actually taking time, and I'm sure you have so much going on, but you're actually making certain and almost like blocking time to go outreach, to go connect with different functional leaders, to ask the questions, right? I can only imagine that the result of that is you don't have these surprises that take way more energy to resolve because you get ahead of a potential problem or a challenge and are like all set up, as opposed to we got to do what, right?
Yeah. Well, it's not always. We still manage to get surprised quite a bit about things, as many of the people listening here probably can understand. But like just trying to limit it as best you can with what you can control. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of things we can't control, but at least the things we can control.
I've always kind of had issue with the title of the job of controller. Because I don't know about you, but in a lot of organizations, they're like, oh, those are the no people because they say no to my budget, or they say, but it sounds like you're rewriting that. Maybe we need to give a new title to it, right? The alignment leader or something like that. I love what you're doing with it. It's creating this like free flow of information is what I can only imagine.
Yeah, I think we say no a lot to things that just aren't possible. But we step back a lot, particularly as we've had, in my almost 7 years in this role, I'm on like my 3rd CFO. And so everybody has a bit of a different perspective, right? And so I think you sort of learn to start by asking questions like, well, what's the outcome we're trying to get to? And then you sort of know, okay, what's possible, or you can try to figure out what's possible. Because, in our space, of course, there are things that are just very black and white, but if we understood better what the desired outcome was, or better understood the facts or had different people at the table to ask, like you might come up with a different solution. So I am probably a little bit more unique in that space. I mean, I spent a lot of time in the business before I came into this technical role. So a lot of my team is very technical and I rely on them a lot because like that's just they're so much better at it. The stuff comes like, right off the top of their heads and tongues to them. But that being said, I think there's a way in which to operate, which is okay, where is something you can't cross? There's a line and it's bright or it's brighter. And what else are there things like, that we can work towards that offer a solution that the business is agreeable to? And sometimes it's as simple as like, what if you did this? Or what if you just change these few things? And that's agreeable too. So you sort of can get to yes, but with, some changing in, how we get there.
So I love that you're saying we say no a lot, right? Because a lot of times people, they try to be pleasers. They try and say yes. They get themselves in trouble, or they stack too much on. And like, if you're trying to focus on 20 initiatives, nothing gets focused, right?
Yeah.
It's like that. But the nuggets I took from what you just said is not just saying no on the surface, peel back the layers of the onion and kind of say, what is the outcome? Maybe there's a different way to get to it, right? And then what is possible? And I think I just want to highlight that like that path is not just a no, we can't do that, or no, it's the kind of connection to say, well, we'll explore it, but does it go back to the alignment that we had with the rest of the organization that we talked about earlier, right?
Yeah, well, and I think you probably had the same experience. People don't like to be told no, right? So they want to or yes, but it's yes, but we got to do all these other things to be able to get there and, feel good about how this comes together. So, maybe that's, especially now, there's all sorts of things changing in how we go to market and how we do our jobs. And you mentioned earlier AI and digital. It's super interesting to see how the business is picking that up and, what they're trying to do in innovation. I mean, I'd say, frankly, in the finance organization here, we're behind on that. And we've got some work to do to really have a good strategy that is deploying AI where it makes sense and not just to deploy it. So I do worry a little bit, we will find ourselves behind there, but I think we'll have a strategy that allows us to bring more of that into how we work with, the functions and teams here and how we pull together, our results and things like that.
Yeah, we're seeing, everybody's talking AI. Our boards want us to have AI and so forth.
Yeah.
I actually believe in a more conservative approach. I think there's a lot of technologies that companies have today that are infusing AI into their existing technology stacks, right? So organizations that are like, oh, we got to get the AI, you're probably doing it and you don't realize it's in the tools you already have today, right? And then you can figure out that roadmap. What do you think the biggest challenge is going to be for an organization of your size AI is coming. You're going to start automating using AI in some shape, way, or form. What do you think the biggest challenge is going to be with that?
When I look at 3M and our organization, I think there's a lot of opportunities, particularly where we're running on old sort of legacy systems. Like we've got acquisitions and countries, like I'm sure some of our listeners here have too, where there just hasn't been the investment return to do a lot of investment in these places. So we still got people and old processes, and those things are dying slowly, So I think that's going to be a space where we try to do more is okay, how and why do we bring some of this, other data in? It's not that we have a shortage of data. It's sort of what do we do with it? And how do we make it more useful for people to make decisions with? So I think we'll find ourselves doing some of that. And maybe I'll just speak to, a bit about what my organization is going to be thinking about and doing in that space, where it's all like routine transactions. We're still doing a lot of manual journal entries. So there's still opportunities that we have not explored yet. And we've put lots of guardrails around like at what level we do them and how often we do them, but it's still rather manual. So there's good amounts of work to be done there. I think, one place, and maybe our listeners will appreciate this, is sort of like variances and trends, and why does a balance sheet account look like this? And here we kind of roll everything up from a legal entity to a country to consolidate at 3M. And so you're trying to kind of carry all this data with you. And so that's one of the first places we're looking is how do we use that AI and better digital advancements to take some of these narratives and keep rolling them up and be smart enough to know which ones should stay and which ones, are not significant. So we're trying some places, but I wouldn't say, again, like we've got sort of the magic pill there.
If you had, let's say you had a niece, a daughter, or even a son, somebody coming up in the ranks in accounting, and they said, Teri, I want to be the chief accounting officer someday. What skills, what knowledge, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, I think coming up through the finance ranks and into this role or another finance leadership role, it's assumed like you have the fundamentals of finance, right? So you've, maybe come up through the ranks in analyst roles at 3M, we're a manufacturer. So having that background and knowledge about manufacturing and supply chain, and maybe like to pull up, like just understanding how data flows and products flow and business flows. Like there's some really unique majors and degrees that we're seeing some students come in. They're like a combination of finance and supply chain, or they are digital activation and finance, marketing and finance, like just, and it sounds maybe on the surface like, oh, we're specializing in some way, but I think the reality is that the skill set is broadened beyond sort of just finance or accounting. And accounting is even more narrow, right? I've had the pleasure of going to the University of Minnesota and some other places to try to drum up some excitement around being an accountant. And I liked it and got into it because I liked, the organization of it. And it did seem rather black and white on how you do things. And there's, like I said, there's still some of that. But I think, so there's that. So there's having like the grounded traditional education. But I also think it's like showing up and leaning in. And, I tell people some of the best experiences that we have are when we're doing things sort of outside our work groups, right? So if I'm in a role where I'm just doing consolidation, well, I might say, like, sign me up for a project that I get to work on the deployment of a new reconciliation tool, because then I get outside my work group and I get to not only meet other people, but I get to see how things connect. I'm always telling people, like, if there's opportunities to do mentoring circles or cross-functional cafe connects or coffee meetups or whatever, like go and ask them, what's your job like? How do you interact with finance? How do you want to see finance show up? Like, and you get really interesting answers when you ask sort of open-ended questions like that. So I ask people and tell people, like, think about the relationships you build and a bit about, maybe it's not brand. Maybe it's brand. Maybe it's more like.
Where's brand?
How do you want people to, show up or think you show up, I should say. And then maybe the other one I would say is, I've gotten the most out of my career, maybe not with the formal mentoring relationships, but more of those that I would call like they became advocates. Like, so they see like what you're capable of because they've worked with you or, you've supported them in some way, partnered with them in some way. And so then they're like always there sort of pushing like, well, why not Teri? And why not, this role? And those have been very impactful in my career. So I tell people that, like, people watch what you do, and you do, like, generate a brand and a perception, whether you think you are or not. And so I just think that that's been an important part, I think, of my career and getting to the role I am, because I'm not like the most technical person that could have filled this this job. I know that.
But it sounds like you're the perfect fit with your outreach. And what I'm kind of hearing you say is, reach out, connect, raise your hand, volunteer, get involved, learn, and connect.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine that you're doing that over the years. It does not surprise me that people were advocating for you and your success.
Yeah.
And I also look at it as, that alignment is saving so much time and energy in the organization with the projects, with like everything. And I'm certain it will bring you guys even more success as we keep going faster and faster.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. Every now and then I want the pause button. Don't give me the easy button. Give me the pause button.
That is like when you think back to, years ago, or not even that long ago, like that there was what felt like more pauses or more opportunities to sort of catch your breath. In fact, when I was in public accounting, we had sort of peaks of our time, and then there were like these valleys where maybe we weren't all that busy. I don't think that happens for many in our profession anymore. I think it's just sort of, what priority or project do you roll on to next? And so there is probably an art to, like, what are those priorities, and maybe not having so many of them. Like, how do you, work on a few sets or a few themes that, everybody can kind of see themselves in, or how they can help, the teams be successful or deliver on the goals. But yeah, that can run away pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah. Well, Teri, we are just about out of time. This has been so much fun. I actually didn't realize how much time it's gone by. I love talking to you. I think you're an amazing role model. And, any parting words you'd like to share with our audience?
Yeah, one thing I'd share is opportunities for people with finance backgrounds. Like, I look at 3M, or even in other companies I was in before I came here. Like, finance people just generally have, I think, like a level of respect, right? Like, that you sort of have that foundational education and knowledge that I talked about. And so then I think it's sort of like, what do you do with it? And I think the really good ones, like, find their place and kind of can move, whether you move laterally. I made plenty of lateral moves in my career because I wanted to get to something different than what I was doing. Or, like, getting out of finance entirely. That wasn't a choice I made, but I had those opportunities. I just chose to stay in finance. So I do think, again, back to like what I said earlier about, like, don't underestimate our role and our voice. I'll ask people just to maybe think about that, and how you could have, that type of role or voice in whatever role you have. You're an intern, you're new to the company, like, you have an opportunity to lead at all those levels. And I have seen plenty of examples of that. Don't wait till you're like leading people, to be able to show up like that, because you might not get the chance then. So I don't know. I mean, maybe that's what I'd leave people, with as sort of how I would sum it up.
I keep visualizing you as your younger self raising your hand saying, I got this. I got this. Maybe it's just my assumption, but I think that's what I'm hearing from your stories is step into your leadership role and own it.
Yeah. Well, I'll maybe just leave you with a quick story. So when I first came to 3M, they hired me to do transactions, like divestitures was what I was working on. And so I was like the technical piece of that. And I sat in a meeting with all these guys that were talking about how we were going to divest this business and we needed to do XYZ. And And I later found out that they were really challenging me because, like, apparently a lot of times finance had said, no, we can't do that. No, that can't be done. And so here I was saying, sure, I'll do it. Even though I'd been there, like 6 months and I had no idea. We did ultimately pull it off, the project that they're talking about. It might have been because I didn't know it previously had been said it couldn't get done. So, I mean, I was like, and this guy, he's not at 3M anymore, the one that said this to me, but he still remembers that, 20 years later, he's like, that was really interesting. Like, you just kind of like leaned right in and said, I'll do it. And like, why not? Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I love that story. It's actually what I picture of you, so that fits right in.
Well, thank you, Heather.
I really appreciate your time, Teri, and best of luck to you. And we're looking forward to seeing the next innovations coming out of 3M.
Yes. Great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Teri, thank you. This was one of those conversations that actually reminds you of what modern finance leadership actually looks like. Listeners, here's the takeaway. If the pace is accelerating in your business, your job isn't to run faster in 20 directions. Your job is to reduce complexity, create alignment, and build a finance organization that can move with the speed and control you need. 3 ideas that you can carry forward from Teri. Simplify on purpose. Standardize what you can so you're not burning talent, and avoid manual work. Number 2, earn your seat upstream. Relationships are not nice to have. They are how you prevent the downstream surprises. So go connect. And finally, 3, lead with outcomes. Don't default to, no, we can't do that. Start with, what's the outcome we're trying to achieve? Then find the compliant path to yes. And if you're early in your career, raise your hands. Volunteer for the cross-functional work. Build advocates, not just experiences. I'm Heather Cole. Thanks for listening to the Financial Executives Icon Podcast. If this episode helped you, share it with a finance leader who's trying to keep pace without losing precision. Until next time.
Your career doesn't grow in isolation. It grows in rooms, relationships, and real conversations. So here's your next move. Expand your network through the FEI network, because the right connections increase your net worth and your impact. Plug into the programs, the people, and the community, and keep showing up until opportunity recognizes your name.